Key mathematical ideas and skills. According to Booker, the coordination of the thinking for number and space, along with an understanding of how the metric system builds on place value, zero, and renaming, is essential in both building measurement understanding and using it to come to terms with and solve many practical problems. Ausvals, measurement and geometry. Using units of measurement. Measure and compare the lengths and capacities of pairs of objects using uniform informal units, Level 1. Assumed prior knowledge and skills. The assumed prior knowledge for this lesson is knowledge of length and capacities. Children are then able to move on to the volume, width, and mass of objects. Common misconceptions and difficulties. Common misconceptions include the correct alignment of the zero on the ruler when measuring and counting the number of spaces or intervals rather than marked points on the line. These common misconceptions and difficulties can be eliminated by ensuring children know the value of the zero and where it belongs on a measuring tape or ruler, ensuring the value of the spaces on a ruler or measuring tape is taught and understood before measurements commence. Learning objective. The learning objective for the lesson is to encourage children to form a relationship between lengths, measurement, and comparisons. Justification for activity. The learning activity of How Tall Are You aids the children in achieving the learning objective as it allows them to take a hands-on approach with comparing the length of objects and themselves and aids them in forming a relationship between measurement and lengths.
My activity is called How Tall Are You? The materials required are a record sheet, a piece of ribbon, and a whiteboard marker. The children will begin by measuring and cutting the ribbon to their height. They will then fold the piece of ribbon in half to show half their height. Using the recording sheet, the children will find and measure objects that are half their height, a quarter of their height, a third of their height, and 1/5 of their height. After measuring my height and folding my ribbon in half, I found that this chair was half my height. I then record this on my recording sheet. I then fold my ribbon into thirds, and I found that my bag was a third of my height. I then record this on my recording sheet. I then fold my ribbon into quarters, and I found the width of this butcher's paper was a quarter of my height. I then record this on my sheet. I then fold my ribbon into fifths, and I found that the bin was a fifth of my height. I then record this on my recording sheet. Once the children have finished their recording sheet, they should have something in each section. This activity encourages children to form a relationship between the lengths, measurements, and comparisons and build a foundation for measuring fractions.
Ausvals Year 5. Choose appropriate units of measurement for length, area, volume, capacity, and mass. Use estimation and rounding to check the reasonableness of answers and calculations. Ausvals Year 5 Proficiency Strand Fluency. Choosing appropriate units of measurement for calculation of perimeter and area, using estimation and using instruments to measure objects. Assumed prior knowledge and skills. According to Booker, students should already be able to effectively measure items using non-standard units of measurement, such as hands, feet, lengths of paper, etc., before beginning to measure with standard units. Ausvals states that students should be able to measure, order, and compare objects using familiar metric units of length, mass, and capacity. Students should already have begun to develop their understanding and application of the metric units prior to the activity. Common misconceptions and difficulties. According to Booker, a common misconception students have when measuring with standard metric units is incorrectly aligning the zero on the ruler or other measuring instrument and counting the numbers of spaces or intervals instead of the numbers or marked points on the measuring instrument. Learning objectives. The learning objectives for this activity are for students to develop their estimation skills and understanding of standard metric units of measurement, for students to be able to select appropriate units of measurement and instruments to estimate and measure a range of attributes. So today's activity involves getting students to estimate and then measure certain areas and lengths around the classroom. So they'll be given a recording sheet with various widths, lengths and perimeters that they have to estimate. So the first one here says the width of a desk. So students will come up and then make their estimate and then write it in the estimate box. So my estimate would be 55 centimetres. So once students have made their estimate, they have to come up and choose the appropriate measuring device to then measure the item. So I'm going to use a 30 centimetre ruler to measure the width of the desk. So students will come up and then measure using their device. And then that comes to 78 centimetres. Students evaluate the appropriateness of their chosen instrument and discuss which instrument could have been more appropriate for that object or space being measured. For example, a 30 centimetre ruler was used to measure the width of a desk, but students might reflect and then decide that maybe it was a better option to use a 1 metre ruler or tape measure for that object. Adaptation and extension. The activity can be completed independently, in partners or in small groups to cater for the amount of resources available and differentiation in the classroom. The activity can also be extended by adding more complex measurements, such as the distance, perimeter or area around the classroom, schoolyard or entire school, making students come up with their own list of items to measure, asking students to convert their measurements into other units, or getting students to compare or calculate the difference between their estimations and actual measurement. Justification for activity. This activity allows students the opportunity to make their own measurement decisions and then discuss, reflect and evaluate the effectiveness of their chosen unit and instrument of measurement, which according to Ferguson is an effective way for students to learn about measurement. This activity could be further regarded as an exemplary activity as students are getting the opportunity to partake in hands-on, interactive and practical measurement experiences with appropriate measuring devices, making estimations of real-world situations and mastering equivalencies in between units.